Hello there again, Marvin Kilborn here. I'm a retired public school teacher. This video will be about my fifth and really second to last year of teaching at Tatum High School. If you've already watched Tatum High School Part 1 and Part 2, well, this brings you into Part 3. A little bit of recap before I start talking about the events of Year 5, which ultimately kind of started leading me down the road to saying, you know what, I've had enough. Maybe it's time to retire from this. I've done all I can. I'm not going to fix public education. That's for damn sure. There's way, way, way too many things wrong with it for me to even think that I could put a dent in everything that's wrong with public education. But if you recall, the first couple of years at Tatum were pretty damn good, actually. Had Alan Cook was the principal, D. Hart was the superintendent. And then, of course, Hart retired, Cook left, so he brought in these two new guys, these thoroughly, totally unimpressive guys. J.P. Richardson, former second grade PE teacher, became the superintendent. And a guy named Matthew Quick, who's basically a decent enough guy, but just too young and too inexperienced to be running or leading a high school as a principal. So, you might recall, I think it was the last video, I introduced Richardson, said that at the convocation at the beginning of the year, he had told this story, thought it was funny, I guess, but essentially he belittled and disrespected military service, especially his father's military service. So I'm already kind of not liking this guy, just not too impressed with him. Not impressed with his resume to begin with. I mean, you could be a second grade PE teacher and elevate yourself to superintendent. Again, one of the major things wrong with public education. Well, these guys just came in and just continued, just going through the motions. I mean, they didn't do anything to try to improve the district. Not that it needed a whole lot of improvement. It's actually a pretty decent place. But they didn't really do anything. They just went through the motions, the same programs, the same tools, the same things that were in effect under Cook and Hart. They basically just left in place. Didn't really make any attempt to try to improve anything. They did a couple things, in my opinion, that made the district worse, or at least belittled the district a little bit. A lot of school districts will celebrate military veterans on Veterans Day. A lot of districts will have a Veterans Day celebration. And when I first got to Tatum, Tatum also had an annual Veterans Day celebration. It was really cool. And of course, me as a veteran, I was always included, invited to participate in it and sit, on the stage or whatever with all the other military veterans that were being honored on Veterans Day. Well, one of the first things Richardson did, either Richardson or maybe the school board, I don't know. My guess is Richardson. I mean, he's the new guy, the superintendent, top dog in the district. He canceled Veterans Day celebrations, which actually, after making fun of the military and making fun of military service and belittling his own father for having served, kind of made sense that he would disparage the entire, all veterans totally. Hey, he never served. And all things considered, not a very impressive guy. Graduate high school, go to college, become a second grade PE teacher, and now you're a school superintendent for who the hell knows why. No, just not too impressed. So probably not too impressed with himself either. So he's got to bring down anybody else that is somewhat impressive, like military veterans. They're all impressive. Another thing they got rid of, they used to have every 6 weeks, they would have a drawing for the teachers who had perfect attendance, and they would draw the names, and at least one teacher or two or three would get a gift card, usually to Texas Roadhouse, I believe, because I won it one time. It was pretty cool. But it was just a way to acknowledge your most dedicated teachers for never missing a day of work. They also gave a bonus, an annual bonus for perfect attendance or only missing a couple days. And I could be wrong on this, but I could swear to God that they actually decreased the amount of those bonuses, because I always had perfect attendance. So anyway, that's a little prelude. One thing I wanted to talk about year 4. something I left out. Today's world, all the woke nonsense going on, just everything goes. Everybody has to be acknowledged and respected. And not saying that people don't need to be respected, but there are certain things that we just don't really need. And one of the things we don't need is we have a lot of confused young people, mostly young people, boys and girls, who, for whatever reason, aren't satisfied with the sex that they were born into. All right, so at Tatum, my 4th year, they brought this guy in. I'd been told he'd been at the school all 4 years. I don't recall ever meeting the guy. I don't remember his name. He was a black guy, not that that's important. But he's one of these she confused little boys who, for whatever reason, wanted to be a girl or thought he was a girl or whatever. So they allowed him to claim to be a girl and dress up like a girl every day. One of the weird things about this was he wasn't even required to follow the girls' dress code. I mean, this boy would dress, and he would try to dress as sexy as he could. He had wigs that he would wear and dresses. He had this one really short, almost like a miniskirt style dress that the school allowed him to wear because he claimed to be a girl, and they, So that was crazy. And what was one of the sad things about it was, and he was disruptive too. There were a number of fights during the year because a lot of the boys, because he just threw it in everybody's face, this she confused boy that thought he was a girl. He would throw it in anyway, a lot of the boys took exception to the way he was acting. So it caused a bit of disruption. And that was my 4th year, and it was his senior year of this boy, this confused boy who thought he was a girl. Now, you would think when the district allowed this boy to dress up like a girl, have his hair as long as he wanted, and all this kind of stuff, that they would have started looking at the dress code. Said, you know what? If we're at the point where we're going to be required to allow boys to pretend to be girls and girls to pretend to be boys and dress accordingly, then we need to look at our dress code. Because one of the things about the Tatum ISD dress code was the boys had to have short hair. Basically, it couldn't extend below like the top or bottom of the back collar. It had to be short. We actually lost a lot of students over the dress code policy. And one of the funny things about the dress code is you got all these coaches and even the superintendent, they all shaved their heads. For whatever reason, whether they're naturally bald or not, all these guys like to shave their damn heads. And it's like, that's fine. If you want to shave your head perfectly bald, that's your business, but you really shouldn't be putting that on young people. Young man wants to have long hair, then what's wrong with that? And again, if you're going to allow a boy to dress up like a girl, and they even gave this guy a key to the faculty restroom so he wouldn't have to go into the student restrooms. Now, I put a stop to that because I tried to go to the restroom once, and we had a faculty restroom down by the library. I go to open the door, and it's open. He had it unlocked, and he's in there primping. And this is like 30 minutes before kids were even supposed to be in the building. This confused young man thought he was a girl, was in there primping and carrying on. So I emailed the principal and said, no, find him another bathroom. No, I'm not playing. If the district wants to accept this nonsense, if the principal wants to accept this nonsense, that's all fine and well, but you're not going to change my philosophy, especially as a man, especially as a Christian conservative man. This is disgusting, unacceptable. Keep him away from me. Get him out of our bathroom. But anyway, that was, I mainly mentioned that just for one, to point out how messed up our country is right now. I mean, Tatum High School Tatum ISD is a little rural little community. It's not multicultural. It's not Dallas. It's not Houston. I mean, it's a tiny little nothing podunk little town. And yet, for whatever reason, I guess they felt that they were obligated to allow this boy to pretend to be a girl. So that would end up causing a lot of problems the next year with the dress code. I mentioned we lost kids. We lost mostly boys and mainly black boys, because the black boys had their, like the dreadlock thing. And a lot of the kids thought that the Tatum dress code was racist. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I don't know. I don't like to put it on racism. I think it's just a bunch of old white men that just had these ideas about how the kids ought to dress, and that's it. They didn't consider that these are young people and need to kind of present themselves, explore their own identity. They're really not the confused identity, but their identity. If you want to wear long hair during high school, go ahead and wear long hair. I did. So nothing, not gonna hurt anything. Boys wearing long hair. We lost a couple of our star football players. Again, if you followed my videos, I don't have anything against athletics, but in public education, it tends to take precedence over everything, and that's a shame, and I don't think it should. But at the same time, it was kind of a shame to see some of our juniors and senior varsity football players leave to go to other schools to play, all because of the length of their hair. It was ridiculous. Well, this hair thing would come back to haunt, this dress code thing would come back to haunt Tatum ISD the very next year, and also point out just how ridiculously stupid school administrators and school boards are. Again, they should have been smart enough. If we're going to let this boy dress like a girl, wear long hair, wear short miniskirts, then maybe we need to take a look and change and update our dress code, which they did not do. Anyway, that's year 4. At the end of year 4, I keep mentioning I was an Algebra 1 teacher at the high school level. There are certain teachers that teach tested subjects. Algebra 1, English 2, Biology, and U.S. History. And these are the only subjects that are state tested. The results of state tests determine a school district's academic rating. They're all typically shooting for the best or the A rating. So those of us that taught tested subjects were placed under just a whole lot more scrutiny, and we were looked at. I mentioned we had meetings every 6 weeks about test scores. So we're placed under a whole lot more scrutiny than any other teacher in the building because the tested teachers truly are the ones responsible for how the school ends up academically, whether we get one of those top ratings, whether you're an A-rated school or a B or a failing school. So we're placed under a lot more scrutiny. The end of my 4th year, we had probably the best scores the school had ever had, and not just in Algebra 1. For me, Algebra 1, 98% of my students passed that Algebra 1 STAR test. If you've seen some of my earlier videos, you'll know that Tatum, we're doing 55%, 69%, 73%. I think the highest they'd ever had before I came along was 79% pass rate. Not very good. I mean, 55 is among the worst in the state. And 98, which is what my students managed to get my 4th year, 98%, that's at the top of the state. And especially considering the type of school Tatum is, it's not like I'm teaching out in, Highland Park, Texas, the cream of the crop, the super rich kids. The kids are going to pass whether you teach them or not. Now, out here in Tatum, this is a rural, somewhat oppressed community. And, not a whole lot of money out there, at least not amongst the people that live there. So to get 98% was great. And, of course, I have mentioned along the way that good leaders should recognize their people. And, and I look at this way. It's like in professional sports, you have the most valuable player. In professional sports, at the end of the league, the end of the season, there's a winner. Like football, for example, you have Super Bowl champions and everybody on the Super Bowl team, the one and only team in the whole league that actually won the big game, they all get rings and they're all recognized. And you have a league MVP and you have a Super Bowl MVP. So basically, people are recognized for greatness. One of the problems within school districts, it doesn't seem to work that way. Too many of our school administrators, school board members, whatever, grew up during this participation trophy era where everybody gets recognized. There are no bests. There are no winners. Everybody just gets recognized for being there. That's one of the problems I have with Matthew Quick, was he took that approach with all of us teachers that worked essentially for him. We all fell under the principal. And this guy, with only his 5 years experience in the classroom comes along. And like I said, he basically had a free ride. Mr. Cook and some of the rest of us had already straightened out the school. So Mr. Quick, Matthew Quick, had a pretty sweet ride. But it's like you would think that at the end of that 4th year, when, let's see, Algebra 1 was a 98% pass rate, if I remember, biology had a 96% pass rate. English, I think they were even into 80s, which is really good for English. So everybody got really great scores. And at the faculty meeting, once again, Quick gets up and talks about STAR scores and state test scores, and he mentioned something about it. You know, people think that STAR scores are the end-all and be-all of public education, but it's not. It takes all of us. Well, the problem, one of the things Quick was missing is, yeah, STAR tests are the end-all and be-all, at least when it comes to academic ratings and how school districts are judged. Nobody cares how the PE teachers are doing. Nobody cares how the art teacher is doing, or the theater teacher, or for that matter, all the other math teachers. Nobody cares. But those 5 subjects that I mentioned, Algebra 1, English 2, Biology, and U.S. History, that's where the focus is. So yeah, in a sense, it is kind of the end-all, be-all. If nothing else, those of us that actually are willing to teach those tested subjects and accept all the additional scrutiny and criticism that comes with that, if we do great, we really, really should be recognized. And good leaders, real, true leaders, know to recognize their people. I guess school administrators, when they're going through their administration program or their Masters of Ed program or even their Ed.D. I guess they're just not taught leadership skills, which of course is a big difference from the military. You don't get to be a leader until you finish leadership training courses. But in public education, no. So anyway, at the end of that 4th year, the scores come out and Quick gets up and once again talks about how it's the result of a team effort. Everybody's to be congratulated. We all got these great scores and it's a result of a team effort. You know what, there's nothing wrong with acknowledging the entire team. There really isn't. But you better acknowledge your most valuable players. And for some reason they didn't. So anyway, this is the end of my 4th year, beginning my 5th year actually, when he kept talking about how it's just a team effort. And I even told him, I had a meeting with Matthew and I told him, I said, you know what, you really pissed me off. I said, those of us that teach tested subjects, we bust our asses. I mean, we work our tails off to get these kids ready and get the best scores we can. And for you to just turn around and dismiss it like, well, the theater teacher had as much to do with that as anybody else, that's just bullshit. So, again, after 15 years, well, actually at this point, 14 years of just being overlooked and ignored and belittled and treated, it gets old. I'm not one of those people that need to be recognized every single day. You don't got to give me an attaboy every day. You don't got to tell me how great I am every single day. But my God, for a leader to never, ever acknowledge their best employees or the most valuable employees, that's a failure of leadership big time. So that got old. What else? 5th year. This is about my 5th year. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick had been guaranteeing when he was running for re-election, he was promising that every teacher in Texas would get like a 10% pay raise or a $10,000 pay raise. I forget now. I think it was 10%. And lo and behold, at the beginning of my 5th year, the state and I think the federal government too, they all came up with this plan to infuse school districts with, millions of extra funding. I think Tatum, if I remember correctly, we got like an extra $1.5 million or $2 million or some huge amount of money. And the bulk of that money was supposed to go to teacher pay raises. We were supposed to get a 10% pay raise. Well, the way Tatum did it, they came up with some goofy ass weird scheme where it was a graduated scale. Rather than just giving every teacher a flat 10% pay raise, they graduated it. They scaled it. So for example, at that point, I'd been a teacher for over 10 years. So I ended up with an 8% pay raise. In public education, 8% pay raise isn't that horrible, but it should have been a 10% pay raise. And those that had like 15 or 20 years, they were getting anywhere from 12 to 14 to 15% pay raise, if memory serves. I could be off by 1 or 2% there. But so it was just crazy the way they did that. So they had all this extra money, so they just started wasting it. It's one of the things that pissed me off about public education. And I experienced the same things in the Air Force too, where it's like you've got this huge budget and it's all tax funded. The military's funded by tax dollars, police departments, tax dollars, fire departments, public education. Public education is a government agency and it's funded by those of us that pay taxes. So it always pissed me off when these agencies who don't generate their own funding, they actually are taking money from us taxpayers and using it. We expect them, and I expect them to use it wisely. What gives these people the right to just squander tens of thousands, if not millions of dollars on things that they don't need? One of the things they did in year 5, again, us teachers, we didn't get the raises we were supposed to get, but the district made sure to spend this money in other ways. Goodness, they repainted the basketball court in the Coliseum. That was expensive. They had buses, school buses. And I don't know if you understand this, but they wrapped them. They had them wrapped in these fancy colors and banners and stuff. Not expensive. It cost tens of thousands of dollars the district spent to have about 3 or 4 of our school buses wrapped in Tatum Eagle colors. They looked cool, but again, you're just wasting money on stuff that we don't need. A school bus is fine enough. They also we had our school coach left, our head football coach left, so they had to hire a new guy. So they hired a guy named Jason as a head football coach. I have nothing against Jason, nice guy. But for some goofy reason, they also created a brand new position for his wife, who I've mentioned in another video. Goofy, bimbo, blonde-headed, just a stupid woman named JJ. She'd been a school administrator for years, but never, ever had become an assistant principal or even a principal. She basically spent many, many years holding on to or riding her husband's coattails. Because as it has been explained to me, this was the only experience I had with it, but a coach friend of mine told me, no, Mr. Kilburn, this is pretty common within public education. When they hire a new football coach, if the wife needs a job, they'll typically put her in a job if there's a vacancy, or they'll just create a position for her. And that's what they did at Tatum High School. Why they put this woman at the high school, I don't know. But they decided they just created another administrative position out of thin air. I mean, we had a principal, assistant principal, and a counselor, and then they just created this additional position. They called it Dean of Students, but it really wasn't, because the Dean of Students is really more like a principal. But this goofy woman, JJ, she had one task, and it was basically to just sit at a desk. They paid her $73,000. They paid this woman who we didn't even need. They paid her $73,000 simply because they hired her husband to be the coach, and they're paying him $90,000. $90,000 to coach football when your teachers are making about half that. It's insane how public education is set up. So this woman's making an easy $25,000, $30,000 a year, more than us real teachers are. And she didn't really have a position. They called it Dean of Students, and she'd prance around, and she essentially spent her days giving 4th grade reading tests to high school freshmen. This woman was a pain. I've mentioned her before. I've talked about it. There's 2 of us in particular, English 1 teacher. I won't mention her name. English 1 teacher, and myself, an Algebra 1 teacher. We're the only freshman teachers who teach tested subjects. So we were under a whole lot more scrutiny, and this woman just decided to just invade our space on almost a daily basis. She's hanging out in our rooms, trying to tell us how to teach better, trying to tell us how to handle the special ed students and the 504 students. I mean, it was just ridiculous that this woman without a country, this woman without a real job, her job, I guess, was to be to bother me, and the English 1 teacher. She was over a program called Rti Response to Intervention. I don't want to go into all the educrat nonsense about what RTI is, but simply, our response to intervention is you're a teacher, You're teaching your students, you're evaluating your students, you're testing your students, and along the way, while you're doing all this, you're deciding which students are struggling the most, which ones may need a little more extra effort, a little extra tutoring, in school, before school or after school instruction or whatever. But this is what a teacher does. Well, apparently there's a government program called RTI, and it actually falls under the special education category. So essentially RTI is really geared more for special education students, which normally is less than 10% of your student body. So RTI isn't necessarily supposed to apply to every single student in the building anyway, but that's what they were trying to do. Another thing with the RTI is response to intervention. Every single teacher is subject to following RTI, and you're supposed to have a plan, and you're supposed to be able to prove and demonstrate which students are struggling and what you're doing to help those students to get better. That's essentially what RTI is. Well, apparently that program was so confusing. Well, for one thing, they put JJ in charge of it, so that shows how simple the program was. But apparently the program was so complicated, so confusing, that they hadn't even really been doing it for years. Well, all of a sudden, the district decided we're going to have an RTI program. Well, they put JJ in charge of running this program, which essentially only affected me and the English 1 teacher, when every teacher is supposed to fall under RTI. The only ones that were really subject to it were me and the English 1 teacher. And the district, for some reason, hired an RTI consultant. Now, this guy's funny. Quentin was his name, and it's either Quentin Jones or Quentin Adams. I forget what his last name was, but it was Quentin. And he had spent a number of years in public education, first as a teacher and then as administrator. And then he started working for one of those educational region centers, service centers I've told you about that Texas has. And also along the way, he bought his Ed.D., that wonderful little pretend doctorate. They call it Ed.D. So now he's an Ed.D. and he calls himself Dr. Q. And he started a consulting. He left public education and started his own little consulting service called Dr. Q Consulting. Really cute. Dr. Q Consulting. And this guy apparently is an expert on everything and anything education related. You might try to find his website. Just Google Dr. Q Consulting. See if it'll take you to it. This guy's a clown. Supposedly, he's an expert on everything. But one of my problems was, they paid this guy tens of thousands of dollars to come in just about every 5-6 weeks and presumably consult with us tested teachers on RTI. But it was really dumb. We had this spreadsheet that we had to keep, and we were having this one meeting, which I hated going to these stupid meetings. I'd rather be in my classroom actually doing my job, teaching my students, but they're making me and the English 1 teacher go to this meeting with this idiot Dr. Q, who really doesn't know what he's talking about, and in all honesty, didn't really provide any useful knowledge or guidance for RTI anyway. And at the same time, as I mentioned, it shouldn't be necessary. RTI is just a normal aspect of what a teacher does. So you don't really need this elaborate program. And I don't know why the district hired this guy, this consultant anyway, because we've got a superintendent who, by the way, is also a doctor of education. Why doesn't this fool know how to run RTI? If you're only meeting with the teachers, once every 5 or 6 weeks, I would think a superintendent would have time to do that. So you're paying this superintendent almost $250,000, who apparently can't do his job, so the district has to turn around and waste money on an unnecessary consultant, making tens of thousands of dollars at any schools he can manage to talk into letting him consult for. It was ridiculous. So anyway, this stuff's happening, and I'm like, okay, I'm in my 14th year at this point, and I'm like, I'm just getting tired of it. Think Through Math reared its ugly head again. As part of the RTI program, me and the English 1 teacher were required to give our students these periodic assessments that didn't really prove anything. The only the program I was required to use to give my freshman students these little assessments was Think Through Math. There's these assessment tests that the kids can take to show their growth, how much they've learned. And the problem with Think Through Math is it didn't correlate with Texas Algebra 1 standards. Certainly didn't correlate with what I was teaching and the way I was teaching it. So when the kids would sit down to take this Think Through Math test, they would fail it miserably. For one, it was usually not even testing them on stuff that I taught them, and was also testing them on stuff that they weren't even going to see on the Algebra 1 STAR test. So the kids were doing horrible on that test. Now, that part of it didn't bother me as much, the fact that they did bad. I didn't expect them to do good. But what pissed me off was, okay, you've hired me to teach Algebra 1. I'm in here trying to do my job. I'm here every single day. I don't miss. I could be deathly ill, and I'm still at work doing my job. And but now you want to keep taking me out of class. You want to take me out of class to go to this meeting. You want to basically take a whole day of instruction away from my students to give them this stupid test that doesn't really tell us anything. So, and I'm talking to Mr. Quick, talking to Richardson. Nobody will listen. And again, these fools, they're just going through the motions. They're doing what they're, I guess, expected to do or maybe told to do. I don't know. Quick's not man enough to stand up to the superintendent and say, hey, look, dude, we need to get JJ out of here. She was disrupting the whole school. Nobody liked her. Nobody could stand her. And Quick, rather than getting her out of there and taking control of his school and keeping his teachers happy, he just left her there the whole damn year. Well, the next year they finally did. They transferred her down to some other school, got rid of her. Now, I had also learned that this was kind of this woman's history. Her husband was a football coach at Lufkin, Texas. And same thing happened there. They hired him to coach football, and then they created a position for JJ. She was such a pain in everybody's butt. They ended up transferring her to another campus to where she couldn't really bother anybody and just stay out of the way. And Tatum wasn't even smart enough to do that. What they really did was should have got rid of her, but no, they left her there. All right, what else happened year 5? I think this is gonna be a long video. What else happened year 5? I already mentioned about the boy the previous year who was a he/she. He thought he was confused, thought he was a girl. Well, the next, and I said they should have fixed the dress code to accommodate for changing times. So next year, this little boy, I believe he was only about 4 or 5 years old. I think he was in the Head Start program, possibly kindergarten. I don't know all the specifics, but I know he was just a 4 or 5-year-old little boy just entering the district, and he had long hair. And so the district said, hey, he's got to follow the dress code. He's got to cut his hair. Well, the grandma and people raising him didn't want to cut his hair, so they refused to follow the district dress code. So school districts, these superintendents, principals, school boards, the more I think about it, I just have to laugh because they're so amazingly stupid. So they should have really taken a look at the dress code and said, you know what, this hair length thing for boys is just stupid. It's not that critically important. Maybe we ought to get rid of it. So, but no, they stood by their guns. So they banished this little boy to the principal's office. The little boy had to sit in the principal's office every single day. He wasn't allowed, 4 or 5 years old, wasn't allowed to be in the classroom with children his own age actually learning something. He was banished and kept in the principal's office all day long simply because of the length of his hair. Well, Grandma is from a place called Compton, California. If you're familiar with Compton, California at all, I don't know how the heck this woman ended up in little podunk Tatum, Texas, but coming from a place like Compton, California, and yeah, she was a black lady and the little boy was black. So you come in, you get people from Compton, a whole different breed. So she wasn't going to lay down quietly for the district, forcing her kid, her grandkid actually, to stay in the principal's office all day long. She had a meeting with the superintendent According to the woman, the superintendent told her the easy fix to this is have your boy claim to be a girl. Because if he claims to be a girl, then all bets are off. He can wear his hair long, he can wear dresses, he can dress like a girl. So then he can go right back into his classroom. So he can't be in the classroom as a boy with long hair, but he can be in the classroom if you claim he's a girl and let him wear his hair long and put dresses on him. Smart superintendent. Now, of course, the superintendent denies saying that. Hell, I probably deny saying that too. And I don't know for a fact whether he said it or not. It's not even important because this lady tried to make the dress code into a racist type thing for this little town of Tatum. This story went nationwide. I know for a fact it was on Good Morning America. It was probably on other news shows too. Certainly the local news media was following it. The lady staged a little protest march out front of the school administrative offices. You had the news crews there filming them. They had several school board meetings all about this deal. It just became basically the school board in its stupidity and the superintendent in his stupidity ended up making Tatum High SD just a joke, a laughing stock, all because of the length of these kids' hair. So anyway, that's something that happened my 5th year. And so not just another thing too, that saying, you know what, I got to get out of here. I'm working for fools, and they're so stupid they can't even learn from past mistakes or anything. They're just stupid. God. Funny thing is, the 5th year, my 6th year, and I'll just go ahead and say this, that after going through all that with the dress code policy, shoot, I think even Al Sharpton was supposed to show up. I don't know if he ever did, but it just got crazy. And so at the end of the year, the school board, they changed the dress code to all of a sudden now boys can wear long hair. Well, they should have done that before dragging us through the mud nationally on national TV. But again, these school boards, if you haven't picked up on one thing in all the videos I'm doing, I don't have much use or respect for school administrators or school boards. As far as I'm concerned, they're all just a bunch of idiots. All right. What else happened? Of course, year 5 is when COVID came along. I think I'll just finish out by talking about COVID a little bit. I've mainly talked about the most. Oh yeah, my calculators. My 5th year, I finally got the calculators that I've been asking for too. I guess I've made enough noise, and I was complaining too. I'm like, okay, the district got all this extra money. You're able to buy new school uniforms. You're able to, football uniforms. You painted the basketball court. You've wrapped these buses. You've hired an unnecessary dean of students and put some stupid blonde bimbo in that position. You're giving this Dr. Q guy, Dr. Quentin, tens of thousands of dollars to consult with us on something we don't need consulting on. So you've got plenty of money. We've got tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of money just laying around all of a sudden. Where are my damn calculators? Well, I finally got my calculators. Didn't get to use them long though, because I'm trying to think if there was something else. Oh yeah, year 5 is also the year, and I mentioned this in an earlier video, had a boy, was the English 1 teacher's student. This boy decided to get up and destroy this lady's personal property. She was a big fan of this artist. I don't remember the artist's name. Bob something, I think. But she had this almost full-length cardboard cutout of this artist that she really liked. And she had it up on her bulletin board. And this boy decided to take a pair of scissors and just go over and cut the head off of this English teacher's personal property. Well, Matthew, basically being an idiot, not really knowing what he's doing, being inexperienced, as far as I'm concerned, didn't even really care. He was an administrator. They don't care about teachers, not really. So all he did with this boy was assign him to in-school suspension for 3 days. And he was going to put him right back into the English teacher's classroom. And of course, I went down and was going to talk to her about it. I even talked to Matthew. I said, no, man, that's not good enough. You got to look at this boy. You could look at that as a threat. I mean, he's got a pair of scissors and he's destroying her personal property in her classroom with her in there. Clearly, this guy has no fear or respect for rules or how he's supposed to behave himself. So you're going to put him in SAC for 3 days and then let him go right back into her classroom? And he told me, well, Mr. Cohen, our hands are tied. We have nothing else we can do. And I told him, oh, no. You absolutely have. No, he shouldn't even be allowed to come back to school to begin with. And he absolutely should never be allowed back in her classroom. And sure enough, I went down to the English teacher's classroom, and she was smart enough, thank God. She'd already contacted the Texas Classroom Teachers Association, and they told her about this form to fill out that would guarantee that this boy never sets foot in her classroom again. Why didn't Matthew Quick know about that? Why didn't J.P. Richardson? Why didn't these so-called education experts know, administrative experts, why didn't they know to do that? Why did the teacher, the poor English teacher, have to take the step herself to protect herself when her principal, Matthew Quick, should have been the one protecting her from this boy? So anyway, that happened. That's another area where I lost respect for Quick. I mean, so as the years go on, it's just crazy. And then, that's the bulk of it, then along came COVID, okay, right before spring break. And of course, I'm teaching my kids, and I'm just about to start getting getting them ready for the state test. Along comes this COVID thing. So during spring break is when it really started taking over the nation and education and other businesses and stuff. The government started taking a look at how we're going to handle this. So we never went back to school that year after spring break. Us teachers, and one of the weird things about it is the only teachers that were required to come back after spring break were those of us that teach core subjects, math, English, social studies, science. Elective teachers, coaches, all the other ones, they weren't required to come back. They also weren't ever required to even do anything as far as their job for the rest of the year. The only ones that were required to do anything were core subject teachers. And they made it clear, we had a meeting, and the principal, Matthew Quick, made it clear that essentially the school is closing down and we're going to try to go into some kind of online instruction, some internet-based virtual instruction. He told us, and this is part of where they really started losing me, told us only core subject teachers were required to assign lessons to students, and nobody else was. And core subject teachers were only required to assign one short lesson a week. So we went from basically 40-hour school week where kids are spending 5 hours a week in each subject, so all of a sudden we're expected to assign just one easy assignment that shouldn't take the students any more than 10 or 15 minutes to do. And if the students turn it in, we were expected to give them hundreds, regardless of how the work was. Also, we were told students that don't turn anything in, just go ahead and give them a 70. So if they do the work at all, give them 100. If they don't do anything at all, they've decided to check out, they're not doing this school thing anymore, COVID's shut us down, then just give them a 70. So, so I lost even more respect for public education at that point. As far as I'm concerned, public education is the only agency, the only government office, the only entity that just willingly, compliantly, and voluntarily shut down. We've still got it going on. Watch the news. I'm pretty sure this stuff's still going on in LA, Oakland, San Francisco. I mean, schools refusing to reopen, refusing to allow kids back into the classroom. But it was amazing to me and insulting and disgusting to me how quickly public education just threw its hands up and said, we quit. We're not going to bother doing our jobs anymore. Not really. I mean, you give a kid a one single assignment, and it doesn't matter whether they turn it in or not. We're just playing. It's not supposed to be a game, but it turned into a game. So that's how we finished out the rest of the year. At the beginning of the year, again, I wasn't thinking I mean, I was already kind of planning on retiring, but I always had my hopes that I would teach until I was about 70. I always said I would keep teaching until I was 70 unless I stopped loving it. Well, I never stopped loving teaching, and I never stopped loving being a teacher. But all the other crap, and if you followed my video series, I mean, there's like 23 videos now. This is 24. It's just a horrible, horrible profession ran by fools that don't really care about the teachers or the kids for that matter. These upper echelon guys, these administrators, school board members, well, school boards, they don't matter. Superintendents, they're all in it for the money. They don't care. So I went from that to COVID and found myself with all this time on my hands at home, being able to hang out with my wife and just do things around the house. And I would just have to get online for a few minutes a day to grade the students' work, which was simple because it's basically, if you gave it to me, it's 100. If you don't give me anything, it's a 70. So you're going to pass anyway. So anyway, that's year 5 in a big nutshell. Next video will be my last in my series on my story. I'll explain why I ultimately decided to go ahead and retire the very next year. It's an interesting story. It's kind of an ugly story. A quick preview of it is I essentially became a victim of the online web rage Facebook mob, whatever you want to call it. Got caught up in this cancel culture. Let's just attack people for no reason. Let's try to set out to destroy people. And that's essentially what happened to me. A group of young, angry people decided to gang up and try to hurt me. They failed miserably. I mean, they failed. They really did. It didn't hurt me at all. But I'll tell that whole story in my next video about what ultimately led me to retiring. But it was a combination of things. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye.